Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Welcome back to another episode of The Unfinished Idea. This week is a very special episode, very, very, very special episode because we are celebrating 1 year of the podcast. That's right. We have turned one, guys. We are no longer babies. We are toddlers. And I'm so excited. We are celebrating big over here. We have so many things going on, so many things. We are celebrating with food. We're having friends over. May not have done a cake smash because one, I think they're just the funnest. And I was like, the podcast turns one. Why can't I do it? We're celebrating. And this episode's a little different because I wanted to take some time to reflect on things that I've learned this past year, have Chris on and talk about what he's learned this past year. And then as well, talk about what I want the world to know about neurodiverse people. And this episode is going to be sprinkled in. As you know, I ask everyone on the podcast what they want the world to know about neurodiverse people. And so you're going to be hearing from some of them again. So yeah, I'm excited. Let's grab your drink and let's jump into today's episode. Okay, so first off, my reflections. And I have a lot. I sat down and wrote them out and was like, this is probably an hour in just itself. So I'm going to try and get dense so you don't hear ramblings. But my ADHD brain means we could go anywhere. Let's be honest. It's me in front of the mic. So let's get into it. First thing is I learned so much about podcasting and what goes into podcasting, the realities of podcasting, how you have to just put yourself out there. I'm constantly just putting myself out there and saying I'm good. I'd be good for this, or you should do this, or, just all these things. And I am so grateful for the That Sounds Fun network, who have guided me on my way, who have said, you got this when I needed it, who've said, buck up, girl, when I needed it, who said, we're cheering you on. All the things, which I am so grateful for. So shout out to them. And just, their continued support. Want to first say that. The other thing that I've learned, though, through kind of thinking about specifically podcasting is when you put yourself out there, yes, there is an option for rejection, always. But actually, I didn't really hear a lot of no's this year. For the amount of asking I put myself out there for, I didn't hear a lot of no's. And it opened up doors and conversations with other people and put me in rooms and places with people that I've been a year and a half ago, I would never have thought I'd be doing this. As in having this conversation with this person or being in this room or giving this talk. It's amazing. And what I've learned is you know what? Their no isn't that bad. Put yourself out there because the reward is far greater than the no. Yes, a no happens. I'm not saying did not get any no's. I gotten some no's this year, but it's worth the risk, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And that's not just for speaking engagements or podcast guests or being on podcasts or anything like that. Even just little stuff that I was oh, I can't do that. I was you know what? I can. Yeah. What's the worst that's going to happen? So I would do it. And, it would be really good is what I'm trying to say is even the small stuff that maybe I was worried about, maybe I was unsure about. I was what's the worst that can happen? They say no, that's fine. Move on. There's other things I could be doing. So I want you to be encouraged by that. It's okay it's not don't get me wrong, no's hurt. I'm not saying oh, that didn't hurt, moved on, whatever. But at the same time, not asking, I think to me now is harder than hearing the no, if that makes sense. And just kind of that reality, because they could say yes, and then it could open all these doors. It's basically what I'm trying to say. So there's that reflection. It's definitely made me more braver, stronger, courage, all of those things definitely have increased this year, which also like leads into the everyday. Like it's not just in like the podcasting big stuff. It's in the everyday is I guess what I'm trying to say is in all areas that's increased. The other thing is just the realities of being neurodivergent, I guess, which sounds really silly because you're like, Greer, that's the whole point you started this, which is, yes, the point. But having so many conversations with people, and every conversation I learned something from. Like I took something away for me, for my marriage, for my family, for my friends, like always took something away. And sometimes it was just encouragement. Like there is a conversation that I had that I literally like kind of cried. And they are seasoned moms. Shout out to the Moms Talk Autism ladies, because they just gave so much encouragement and wisdom of like, yeah, keep going. So every episode I got something from, and I hope you did too. I hope that's, you got something from a snippet, a nugget from every conversation, because that's why I tried. But through these conversations, I guess my expansion of being neurodivergent, being a neurodivergent family, couple, friend just grew. And things, techniques that I never thought about, we tried and some worked and some didn't. But now I can say, oh, we tried that and it didn't work. Or we tried that and this is how, the outcome, or this is how it worked. We had, from conversations about friendships and marriage and relationships, and just thinking about how I engage with my husband and how we set up communication styles, and all of those things have happened because of conversations I've had on the podcast, which is pretty amazing. So like I said, this could be like a whole hour podcast, which is not what I want it to be. And so basically what I'm trying to say is every conversation, I just learned a little bit more. It was like I just had another little breadcrumb moment, or a little nugget, or whatever you want to call it, of just seeing how diverse the neurodivergent world is, how big it is, but also how passionate and compassionate people are. One of like, I don't know if highlight's the right word, but going down to London and being part of the rally, kind of to say like, we cannot cut our support for our children. Like one of the things I loved about that day was seeing people in person. Like I've had all these conversations with people in the DMs and on the podcast, like all the things, but never met hardly anyone in person. And so to do that in person and to meet them and to be like, oh my gosh, you're real. Like it's so fun and just so amazing and energizing. Like it really just like energized me. Like, yes, we are a community. We are passionate. We have drive. Like we fight every day for our kids, and we are also going to fight for everyone else's. Like, I think that's something that I also realized this year is, we often start the fight for our own kids, but we also are like, we want to change for everyone. Like it's not really about just our kid anymore. It's about everyone. And you really get that sense in the community. So hopefully you as well have felt that. That's, again, my aim is that you are reminded you're not alone, because there's a whole community out there. And I'm in that community cheering you on. I say it all the time. I'm cheering you on. And I mean it. I really am, because I understand it. I understand those dark days and those dark moments and those times when you sit on the floor and cry, because we've also been there this year. It's not been perfect. It's not been easy. We have had lots of moments of crying, moments of wanting to give up. But I also remember what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I have my own cheer squad. So yeah, keep going. Okay. Just know I'm cheering you on. So as you know, I have been asking the question, what do you want the world to know about neurodiverse people, on every episode? And we're going to hear a few of those answers right now.
Take some time, because I think there's a lot to be gained out of recognizing and holding your artistic self with compassion.
The main thing I would want the world to know, if they don't already, is that it isn't a disorder. Like, there is nothing disordered about us. I think it's just human variation, basically. And actually, when we talk about neurodivergent traits, they are just human traits. It's just the prevalence and kind of severity of how that affects our daily life that maybe makes somebody neurodivergent, for example. But I think just knowing that neurodivergence, it just is, and it just is that difference. And if we can take away that, then I think that goes a long way to reducing the stigma and shame that so many neurodivergent people experience.
Oh yeah, I suppose with I've been quite influenced by, over the years, like by the work of people like Nick Walker. So Nick she's like wrote like quite a lot around neurodiversity, the neurodiversity movement paradigm and those sorts of concepts. And I've, over the years, like really learned to embrace the whole idea of the neuro paradigm, which is really just stating that, there's no one correct or right way to be or exist in this world, and just that there's an infinite variation in our human population and everyone's like valid equally. So I would hope that, everybody, and I guess I usually do start a lot of the training sessions, workshops with a sort of message or, statement or point along the lines about, neutrality, in terms of how autistic, otherwise neurodivergent people were not superior, not inferior to like anyone else in the population, so just having that concept of neutrality and understanding that, even because like some of us are neurodivergent, it doesn't make us somehow lesser to anybody else. And I think, just like was the aim of this book really, was to try, help create or help people begin to think about, what does an inclusive and accessible environment look like, and how can we actually cultivate these spaces and events where, actually it's going to be open to everybody, not just like, the dominant groups per se, and just like, embracing different communication styles, the diversity of the way people socialise, learn, and all these sorts of things.
They generally make the world a better place. And it's a privilege. It's a joy and it's hard, but it's a privilege to be around people that see the world so differently. I mean, everyone wants to feel special and unique. And we live with neurodivergent children that have the most wonderful sense of personalities. They're the most caring. They're just great people. And I just wish the world would stop trying to just have neurodivergent hour. Let's just have them around, but not too much, but to integrate everybody, because you're missing out. You really are missing out.
I mean, this is something that I kind of turn that on myself a little bit I think I still have a lot to learn about the neurodivergent kind of community and what it means to be kind of neurodivergent. And I think it's, for me, trying to have that willingness to understand and take that time to do that, and then be willing to respond to it and take the time to think through, how does this then affect the actions I need to take, or the way things are framed and structured. So I think my kind of message is one that I kind of is reflected back on myself, of people need it's important to take the time to understand, and then to reflect on that understanding, to see what then is the response to that. And it's, I don't have loads of experience with that kind of in general. So I think it's still an aspect of life that I need to still dive into and better understand. So I think I'm still part of that learning process.
Yeah, and I think mine is just kind of adding to that, of like just remembering the importance of neurodivergent voices, and like Johnny's doing that learning and doing that by listening to neurodivergent people. And I think particularly adults. So like on social media accounts, like I follow quite a lot of accounts of either neurodivergent adults or families who are raising neurodivergent children like yourselves, and just listening to those experiences. But particularly of adults, it's been really, really eye-opening to hear about their experiences when they were children, and to be able to reflect on that and reflect on how are we supporting children, and what are the kind of positives that have come out of that, and what things really need to change. What things did we think were the right thing to do 10 years ago that actually now adults are saying that was really traumatic. So yeah, I think just doing that learning and remembering that particularly adult neurodivergent voices are so crucial to that learning. So yeah.
Difference is good. We're supposed to be here. We bring different things to the table. I am angry about so many things. We're supposed to feel all the feelings that we feel. I am an angry neurodivergent person. It's just I've learned how to channel the anger. It is that we are supposed to be here. We're not errors of genetics. We don't need to be cured. We don't need to be prevented. We don't need to be treated. We actually need to be liberated to be ourselves. Our best selves, yes, but ourselves. That we're supposed to be here. We're not deficit. We're not disordered. We might be different, but diversity and difference is good. So I think that's what I would want people to know. I know that I have my place in the world. I know that my emotional dysregulation that comes as part of ADHD is useful.
So I think that, again, based only on my personal experience, is that I have felt my sons are really misunderstood a lot of the time. And I find that so frustrating. I find that it's been easy to categorize them as being disruptful, disobedient, lazy. There's been, over the years, some really unkind and unhelpful sort of labels put on them. I don't think that people have any understanding of what that does to a child's self-esteem and how they feel about themselves, which really absolutely breaks my heart, because I think that it has a huge impact on their confidence. And I think it stores up problems for later in life if you're not able to address them. I read a statistic, I think it was around, by the time a neurodivergent child is 12, they will have had something in the region of 20,000 more negative comments or feedback than a neurotypical child. I can really believe that. And there needs to be a greater understanding of why a child is doing a certain thing, and I think I've gotten quite a bit of support from Oscar's school around the fact that if Oscar is doing something disruptive in a lesson, it will almost certainly have a reason attached to it. He isn't being disruptful for the sake of being disruptful. Something is happening. Something has dysregulated him. And if actually someone takes the time to say to him, is everything okay? What do you need? What's happening? He will articulate that. And he will let someone know that there's an issue. And I think a lot of the time it's frustrating because actually what then happens is he's disciplined and the negativity starts. And I think that it becomes such a downward spiral. Once a child is in that negative space, it's very hard to start pulling them back. My sons both react to positive reinforcement, like on an astonishing level. I have seen such brilliant results from just that constant positivity. When they do something well, I just jump on it very quickly. And once they're in a positive mindset, they're actually amazing at keeping it going. Once the negativity sort of sets in, then it is much harder to pull it back. I think it's that misunderstanding piece. It's about, underneath that, I have two exceptionally gifted children who are really smart, really funny, and have such talent, but they don't necessarily have talent in the mainstream school environment. That doesn't mean to say they shouldn't be given the positives for the things that they can do well. That is, for me, where I would love to see the biggest change, looking at a child as a whole and being able to see all of them rather than the parts of them that tick the boxes from an educational perspective. I think it's really damaging for a child's confidence to feel that they're always failing to make the mark. And the education system as it is now just doesn't take neurodivergence into the scope. And it's still very much an ableist system, which doesn't really give all children the chance to shine and excel in what they do.
We're all completely different. We all have our own behaviors in common. But it's really unhelpful when people go, well, you don't look autistic or you don't seem autistic. That's because I'm doing a very good job of trying to make you comfortable by not showing you some of the struggles that I have. So I think a little bit of sympathy around that would be quite helpful. If it is being portrayed by a non-neurodivergent actor on TV, ignore everything you've just learned about the condition. Because I think they either have that kind of Rain Man stereotype or the Sheldon Cooper stereotype of you must also be a savant and you know, white male, or you also have that kind of new girl sort of manic pixie dream girl, which is all of the, you know, positive aspects of being neurodivergent with none of the challenges. There's not too many media representations that I would say are super helpful for really understanding what it's like to be operating as a neurodivergent person in a neurotypical world.
That we are capable, and we, although sometimes struggle with friendships, I definitely do struggle replying back to people. We are really good friends. We're really passionate friends. We'll always support, you know, our friends and make sure they're okay, that we do belong in this world. And it's just a little bit more difficult for us with people who don't understand what neurodivergence is. If there was that little bit more understanding and a little bit more acceptance, then I think, you know, it would be amazing, especially in different jobs and works, you know, that talking about the cookie cutter thing, you know, stop trying to mold neurodivergence and just let people who are neurodivergent be neurodivergent. They don't have to change themselves for anything. Just let them be themselves.
They are just the same as everybody else. They're just they're human beings that I think are going to save the human race. I think they're going to save us all. And actually, we need them. And I learned from my daughter, she loves being neurodivergent. She wears it like a badge of honor now.
I would just want the world to know that autistic people have so many capabilities. People have a very closed-minded view of autism still. I think we're getting better, that people don't quite understand how vast the spectrum really is. A lot of people still think that autism is, you know, something horrible and, you know, they're never going to have a happy life. They're never going to be successful. They're never going to be independent. And there is so much potential for all autistic people. They have so much love and empathy. And I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't understand. They think, oh, they're really not emotional, they're closed off, they're cold. And that's not the case. They just have their own way of expressing that. And I think that going along with the conversation of creating a more inclusive world, understanding that people's brains work differently and we experience the world differently. And that's a process to understand. But I think the more that we practice being more aware of other people and their experiences, that'll create a more beautiful world and a more neuro-inclusive world.
I was pondering this question when you sent it to me. Neurodivergent means you diverge from the norm. It doesn't mean it's wrong. And it doesn't mean it's weak. I think a lot of the time we do talk about struggles that neurotypicals tend not to have. And we view it as weaknesses to who we are, how we can function as a human being, when actually it's just a difference. When you have these different options and you're not trying to fit yourself into a neurotypical mold, it becomes a lot easier. And it's a lot easier to see that it's not, a struggle isn't a weakness, it's just not best suited to you. So like, let's say sensory issues with sound. Yeah, it might mean that you find going to the supermarket when the kids are on half term really difficult, but it also means that you can hear things that John can't. When you say like, oh my God, can you hear that? And someone's like, no. Or can you smell that? No. Like I can smell when the bin needs putting out way before it stinks out the flat and my partner can't. It doesn't mean that because I can't handle smells, that's a weakness. If anything, it means that our house smells better because I can't handle really strong smells. Yeah, I think because it's different to the norm, the automatic thought process is that it's wrong or that it's a weakness because you can't reach the norm. A lot of the time, especially when we're late diagnosed, we've spent our entire life trying to fit into what we believe we should look like, how we should function, how we should do things, and how easy or difficult we should find it. And when that doesn't match up, we automatically assume the problem is us, not necessarily the method that is being used or the expectation that it should be done a certain way. So I'm very much about, whenever a client works with me, if there's ever like I should be doing more of this, it's very much a question of why. Oftentimes, even in a neurotypical setting, saying just why as a single word can be quite confrontational. I feel like when I'm talking with my clients, we've got this unspoken understanding. We can talk as blunt as we like, and we know no one's being mean. We're just trying to get to the point. We're just trying to understand each other. I love questions because even if it stumps me, that doesn't mean I'm rubbish. It just means I need to figure something out or change the way I'm doing it. And if we've not got a good enough answer, it's very easy then to say, right, let's try something else then, shall we? And it's like that lifts a weight off of our shoulders, metaphorically, because we think, yeah, I don't have to do it that way. So I think for the world, including neurodivergent people, to know about neurodivergent people is that different doesn't mean wrong or weak.
There's so much that we still don't know, and that I don't know if we'll ever really know everything when it comes to being neurodivergent. And that I think it really is a beautiful thing. It is hard and it is so exhausting, especially if you are neurodivergent and you're raising neurodivergent kids. You know, you're going to cry at the end of a lot of days because it feels extra hard. And there are times where you're going to wish that you had a normal or regular brain because that would feel easier. But I'm like, I wouldn't change my brain or my children's for anything. It makes them who they are. If we were all the same, it's kind of like we were all created uniquely and beautifully different. Like if we all had the same brains, I don't want that. I love that all of my friendships are unique and different, and that I've got neurotypical friends and I've got my neurodivergent friends. And, I think it takes a lot of work, but it is so worth it. And I think there is so much power that we have to either help other people recognize that they're neurodivergent too, or help those who aren't neurodivergent just gain a little bit of insight. They're never going to fully understand how our neurodivergent brains work, and they may want to live in ignorance. They may never want to understand or want to help or be supportive. There are people who aren't going to want that, and that is okay. But there are going to be people who want to support you, who are able to support you, who want to find ways to do that. Not everyone is going to understand, but there are people who do understand, or who want to understand, who want to learn, who want to be better. And the more we can share, especially like women, the more we can be open, even if it's just in like your community, like in your family, with your husband, the more that we can be open about what we're going through, finding a therapist, finding a community. Like it's kind of like that rock in the water. Like you have no idea what that ripple effect will do, or who it will touch, or how it will change. But like it will forever change someone, or help someone, or give someone the courage to seek a diagnosis or to pursue something for their children. And so I think there's a lot of little things we can do that can make a big difference, even if we don't see it right away.
I think what I would want people to really understand is that neurodiversity is like all forms of diversity. It is just normal human variation. And that normal human variation has huge advantage to society. And I think that oftentimes we see variation as something to kind of accommodate in some way. And therefore, that is struggle and that we're having to kind of give up something in order to accommodate difference. I don't see it that way at all. I see that normal human variation bringing huge benefit that if we were all the exact same, we wouldn't have access to novel problem solving that can come from novel thinking patterns, right? If we want to solve problems that have been entrenched forever, we might need to think about it differently. If we're going to think differently, we might need different kinds of brains who think about things differently.
You can cause your partner so much unintentional pain, but you can also heal from it. Once you understand your neurotype, their neurotype, what you need emotionally, socially, sensory issues, your processing speed, your communication needs, your physical intimacy needs, you both can be each other's biggest cheerleaders. I saw this in my marriage. I married a man who in some ways his personality was completely opposite of mine. But when we worked together, which I would say the biggest team effort was when we were raising our daughter, oh my gosh, we were fabulous. And we were fabulous because he was great at emergencies. He was great at getting down on the floor and playing like a 3-year-old. I wasn't good at that. He is extremely creative. And he would do things that I would never do. And I was the one who was engaging our daughter in all the after-school activities, arranging the play dates. And he didn't want to do any of that. So if you understand how you are complementary, what you each need, hopefully you will thrive. But if you don't, I think you'll cause each other a lot of unintentional hurt. And I always say on my podcast, love is not enough. Just loving somebody and feeling repeatedly neglected or hurt or misunderstood isn't healthy. So Greer, for those folks that want to ask their partner questions that I wish I had asked in my marriage, I created the Neurodiverse Love Conversation cards. They're digital. So if anybody is interested, they're $11. They're really inexpensive. You just download it. It's 52 questions. And then I also created a workbook and added another 52 questions. So it's 104 questions. And these are the questions that I think every neurodiverse couple needs to ask each other. And there's probably a lot more I could add. But it allows you to understand yourself first, answer them for yourself, and then answer them with your partner. And oh my gosh, I think it could be the beginning of more neurodiverse couples understanding each other and then deciding if they're still compatible. Because sometimes when you realize your neurotype and what you need to be, healthy and happy and at peace, you may realize you're not compatible anymore. And that's okay too.
I think that what I would like to say is just to encourage people to keep an open mind and to remember that when you're observing the child's behavior, that you are observing only a slice, just a sliver of that child's life. And that slice does not define who that child is. Because you don't know, but that 10 minutes before this behavior, they had held the door open for someone to walk through that couldn't walk very well, or they just voluntarily shared a toy with someone. Or 10 minutes after this behavior, they, might just be greeted joyfully by a dozen different kids from their school. And you're like, whoa. And just realizing that they are more than just what it is that you're seeing at that moment. And to be willing to accept that and to try to find, to learn more about that child, not just what you're seeing right then.
People are people. And we're different. We have to recognize that individuality and difference that exists and address them that way. I mean, I have a number of friends over the years and I don't treat each of them exactly the same and that there's different expectations and different things. that I might call for help to one about how to, fix a car, and I might call a different one on how to fix plumbing. And, I can offer help in some education issues or something like that, because we're all very different and unique, and that we just need to make sure we apply that to everybody. And that it's a different set of behaviors, but that's not unusual. It's not, something we don't already do. It's just maybe a little more required for this, or it's a little more varied than what we have for others. But it's still, we're just all valued and loved and deserve it. So
just sitting here and thinking, it's like you and Chris have had a heart for people with additional needs before you ever had children. And I can remember different events that you've had and just different people that you've had in your home that have had additional needs, and that it wasn't like, oh, they weren't a tack on. They were someone that was important and that you guys initiated relationships with. And so I think that says a lot about your heart and Chris's heart about people and just your love for people. And it's not just your children that you are thinking about, but you're just thinking about people.
I'm not diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I'm neurodivergent myself. And I just to be honest with you, find them so much more fun. I find myself laughing so much more and having such a good time that I just find it. And that's why I specialize in what I do, is just because it's just so fun. And when they get it, it's the best thing in the world. It is better than anything. It's amazing.
I want the world to know that we are here and we deserve to be supported, and we don't have to fit into boxes that we aren't designed to fit into, and that actually with the right support and the right kind of understanding, we can thrive as well. And sometimes we just need adjustments and, things to be just tweaked ever so slightly, and then we can thrive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big question. No two neurodivergent people are the same. We're not talking about a monoblock of people. The old joke that if you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. That is very true. People say, we should hire a lot more neurodivergent people because they have skills that are good at this. They have skills that, they're really good at maths or whatever. And I think that's actually quite harmful. Neurodivergent people are individuals, and in the same way as neurotypical people are. That would be point one. But point two, I would say that neurodivergent people are often at the heart of innovation. So when a company starts excluding neurodivergent people, it often means that they've reached this like ossifying stage where everything's hardening. And the most dangerous phrase when hiring is we hired them because they were a good culture fit. Because once you start to hire people who are a good culture fit, you're only hiring people who think the same way everybody already thinks in the organization. So the organization is going to stop innovating. And that means ultimately the organization is going to start dying. Neurodivergent people bring really cool perspective. And because they think differently, and because often neurodivergent people overcome things in everyday life on a day-to-day basis, they think in creative new ways, which every organization needs. So it doesn't mean that a neurodivergent person is going to, be an expert coder because they're neurodivergent, but it means that when you're asking questions, you will get different answers from neurodivergent people than you will from neurotypical people, because they think in a different way. And that's what makes neurodiversity in general so important, but what makes neurodivergent people so interesting and cool. They think differently.
I want the world to know that if someone that is neurodiverse is telling you they're struggling, they really are. It's not an excuse. Their brain is wired differently. So even if you don't understand why that thing might be hard for them, it is hard for them. And on the flip side of that, I would want people to understand that while there are these struggles that are unique to our brains, there's also some really incredible strengths. So while we have to see those struggles and accommodate those struggles and acknowledge them, don't forget about all of the really positive things that these brains bring to the world. Because when we really focus on strengths, then we are more grounded, we feel more aligned, and, we're just more able to fully contribute to our experience.
Well, here's what's interesting, okay? I've got some theories on this, Greer. Now, I am not a doctor or medical professional, so let me start with that very important disclaimer. What we thought was like a small, tiny percentage of the population
decades ago, centuries ago, we're now realizing is so much more prevalent, up to, 30, 40, 50% of the population have some type of neurodivergent brain. Okay. So some type of neurodiversity in the brain. At what point is it not a disorder? At what point is it just a different way to be? We have extroverts, we have introverts. We didn't create some DSM-5 manual from the extroverts that created it and said all the introverts are broken. They have a disorder of social skills. Someone help the introverts. They need too much time. They're disordered. Who wrote the manual? The people that are neurotypical that said neurodivergence, creativity, ingenuity, inventiveness, artists, entrepreneurs, they're broken? Now, I'm not saying we don't have real challenges. There are real challenges. There are from distraction with ADHD to speech and communication from autism. There are real challenges, and these challenges need support. And I just wonder if it is less disordered and more a different way to be, because with that brain wiring, there's also genius. There is gifting that neurotypical people do not have. But all we talk about is the disorder. All we talk about is the speech or the social skills or the eye contact. We don't talk about the architecture, the art, the medical solutions, the engineering, the poetry, the things that are being created into the world through ADHD or autistic individuals or whatever, that no neurotypical person could ever create because their brain simply does not work that way. Why are we only focusing on the challenges? I just don't believe that. What your question was, what do I want people to know? You're not broken. You're not broken. I don't believe you're broken. I believe that you are created perfectly by a good God who loves you and has good plans for you. And this is true for every parent of their child, every parent who maybe is learning that they have ADHD, like I did since my children were diagnosed. I learned I have ADHD. You are not broken. God created you perfectly, and he has good plans for you exactly the way that he created your brain. He did not make a mistake. And I just would love to see the world focus on the strengths and the gifts and the talents of these individuals instead of the challenges. That's what I would love.
I want the world to know that neurodiverse people are unique and they are talented and they are beautifully formed to make this world a better place. And if we can take the time as individuals around them, as especially children, adults around them, if we can take the time to really begin to understand the nuances of their brain and the way it works, and the nuances of their character and how they respond to things and how they communicate, and what upsets them and what makes them happy, what triggers them and what helps them to calm. If we can really begin to say, I'm going to take the time to find out that information about you, we can create individuals in this world that will be world changers. The way the brain is wired allows them to think in such out of the box ways that they are forces to be reckoned with in the workplace. Let's just take the time, especially adults. I want workplaces to really understand that you have to make modifications. They will work the hardest, but that might cause burnout. So how are you addressing that? They will conform to social situations, but that might be masking and causing dysregulation and tiredness at home. So how are we alleviating some of that pressure? We can't just keep putting on them because they are our best employees. We have to really start to look at how are we protecting them as our best employees as well. And I think for me, it is about just taking the time, being patient and being understanding of the uniqueness that is a beautiful neurodiverse individual and embracing that, but also protecting that at the same time.
I feel like so many people would answer this differently. They're just as capable as everybody else. I know people are torn between like the word disabled or differently abled, and everybody prefers different terminology. I really don't care about the terminology at all. Throw the terminology in the trash because it doesn't matter. That's in my humble opinion. I don't think terminology matters at all. It's just a way for people to be able to categorize things and topics and people. It's just the way that we function. But their brains just work differently. Our brains work differently. It doesn't mean that they function less. It doesn't mean that they're less capable. It just means that they do things in a different way. Is a disgusting metaphor. But like, when people say, there's more than one way to skin a cat, that's how our brains are. We may not go from, A to Z. We might go through, take a whole bunch of different routes to get there, but who cares if you get to the end? That's kind of how I look at it. And we all have different strengths. If you're neurotypical, you're going to have different strengths than other people. It's the same thing. We're all just unique. And I also firmly believe that we are all fearfully and wonderfully made. And I just want, if anything at all, people just think of that first and not put so much emphasis on the words like neurodivergent or autistic or ADHD. It doesn't matter. We're all just different and fearfully and wonderfully made in God's image.
I think a lot of people always say that every neurodivergent person is different. And so I think that's important for people to realize how different we can all be. And I think there's still a lot of stereotypes around autism. I'd really like people to understand that those things that we are maybe penalized for, and those terms of maybe you're selfish or childish or sensitive, that people were able to reframe that and see what's actually going on underneath. I've been sharing some stuff on Instagram about this recently, doing a whole reframing those autism stereotypes. And yeah, I just think respecting someone's right to autonomy.
I always say that by far Strayer has been my greatest teacher in life. I would say literally from day one, he really kind of forced me out of my very type A binary, here's my plan, we're going to stick to it kind of way of thinking. And that literally did not work from the day that we brought him home from the hospital. And so, yeah, every step along the way, he's just forced me out of that box. And I know that I am truly a better human because I have got the opportunity to parent him. He has made my world much wider, much more expansive than it would have ever been, because he has forced me to see things from different perspectives and just a different worldview. I mean, they just see and are in the world in such a different way. I mean, but it's beautiful if we will allow ourselves the willingness and the openness to listen and to learn from them. For everybody. But I mean, yeah, the way that they view and interact with the world is so different, I think, than neurotypical, that he has definitely expanded my world in every way imaginable. And I'm so thankful for that, because I feel like I'm a much better human by having been shown a different viewpoint, a different perspective, a different way of viewing the world through his eyes.
We are normal. And, that is the biggest thing I can say. It's, we are normal. And it's just sometimes that, some of the structures in life, like schools and workplaces and stuff like that, they are very regimented and they might not be the right way to do things. So they don't work that well for us, and we need to make adjustments made. But honestly, we are as normal as a neurotypical person. And, a big shout out to everyone. You're not alone. There's lots of us. 20% of the world is neurodiverse. Some of the greatest thinkers and creators have been and will continue to be neurodiverse. This is who I am. This is who my daughter is. And we should be proud of it and, not feel alone and not feel ashamed. And I think that would be, I remember a time I worked, in HIV in California, Africa, when it was very stigmatized. And now being gay isn't as stigmatized. Neurodiversity is going that way too. We are all special, wonderful people, and our differences are what makes us special. It would be boring if we were all the same. That's my mission, I guess, and my passion.
they're just people. I think that one of my biggest mistakes as a parent was I was so caught up in symptoms and diagnoses and things like that I was not always recognizing that my kids were still kids. And so I would tie everything into like, oh, well, they're autistic, they can't help it, or oh, they have ADHD, they can't help it. The reality is there's a lot of times that they could. And they were little turds about it sometimes because like there was at one point I realized I was wrong, like where I really had gone wrong because they would start using it as an excuse. Like, you can't say that to me, Dad, I'm autistic. And I'm like, oh, we are not doing that. But they're still kids, right? They're still adults. They're still people. They're still humans. They just are wired a little bit differently. They experience the world a little bit differently. Maybe they communicate differently, but they're just as valuable and important, and they bring just as much light to the world as anybody else. And we just have to take the time to see it for what it is, and maybe cut through the wrapping, a little bit, and see what's going on beneath the surface. Because everybody has value, and there's so much value in neurodiversity. We don't need to be afraid of it.
How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pâté. Fancy Feast Gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in one convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast Gems.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least that was the plan. Except now the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
Okay, so I'm now joined by my lovely husband, Chris, who has journeyed with us along the way behind the scenes this year. So what have you learned this year?
I think the first thing I would say is that our kids have been able to just join in all the activities that other kids have been able to do, whether they have neurodiversity or not. However, it has meant that like some adjustments have had to be made. And for example, me getting involved with tennis club, me supporting the teachers in that, or just me preparing the kids or preparing the teachers of whatever club or activity that we're going to. And I found that like they've actually really enjoyed and thrived in just doing new activities that last year they weren't doing roller skating, they weren't doing tennis, and they weren't doing lots of other really interesting activities.
So you've learned that our kids can do activities, which I feel like that's a weird thing to learn through this podcast.
I think in a sense that like when you feel like your kid's got ADHD or, some sort of neurodiversity, you feel like they will be excluded or marginalized or unable to participate and their needs won't be met. And so it was just, I didn't have too many worries, but like it's just a nice surprise that like actually like they were like not only sort of being incorporated into joint activities, but also like thriving in those activities as well. Whereas, I think the stereotype is that like they're excluded or they're isolated from the group or they have no friends. And, so in those types of areas, they really fall behind.
Okay. So what has been like a highlight or favorite highlight or moment from the podcast this last year?
I think just listening to everyone else's experiences and just also the journey that we're going on and the small tweaks and changes. It doesn't have to be something that you have to do every day, or it doesn't have to be something you have to just change straight away. But it can be like, oh, I've just read this and I had this idea. Can we try it and see if it works? And sometimes it does work, sometimes it doesn't work. And then other times, it actually just takes a few weeks for things to actually like, to stick. And I've actually found that like with consistency with our children, they have been able to, I think, do really well and thrive. And so I've learned that, sometimes sticking through things can be actually very rewarding at the end of it.
So you learned that your highlight?
Well, I'd say my highlight is what I've just said, but if you want me to be slightly clearer, my highlight is just hearing other people's success stories and sharing those success stories and being able to enjoy spending time with your kids, because it's not always hard work. Like anything, it can be hard work. But I think the payoff for me has just been much greater.
Okay, so what are you excited about looking ahead? Because you kind of know what's coming ahead, but they don't, so don't give any spoilers.
Well, I'm hoping that it obviously grows and reaches new audiences, but also that, people can be able to, have success in their own life with their own children and their own relationships, but also in the schooling relationships, that those relationships can also be better, but also allowing the kids to want to go to school or enjoy school a lot more. So it's not just about sort of getting them to school, but actually allowing them to sort of thrive and, eventually get to a place where they can be independent adults like us, really.
Great. I'm glad you're excited for our kids to grow up to be adults, but
it's going to be sad as well that they're growing up, because they have seasons, and so they will grow and change, and he may not like tennis or roller skating, or he may not like spending time with me, whether it's watching movies or going to the library. Like, these are all things that I cherish. Because maybe next year that he won't enjoy those, and so I'm glad that he likes some of the things that I like, and that we can share in that.
Thanks for sharing and being with me on this journey. Is there anything else you want to say?
I would also say that, I know it can be hard on the parents, for our relationship, and finding time for us has been challenging. But there have been moments where we're trying to almost engage with each other in our love languages, or just whatever that may be. I know that mine is quality time, and just being able to have those successes at the end of the day with the children, to be able to share in those love languages has been really important as well. And I hope that we can continue, because having neurodiverse kids can eat up all your time, energy, and everything else, and it leaves you nothing for other people, friends or spouses. And so I'm glad that we've, been able to have not just, family time together, but also just time, just us two.
That's very sweet. Good job. Well, we're going to end this section by hearing some more answers from people sharing what they want the world to know about neurodiverse people.
The world just wouldn't exist the way it does without neurodivergent people. We need people who think differently. Those are the change makers. Those are the people that change the world and will create the world we know and that we live in every single day, whether that's technology or through their amazing creative brains and innovations. It's just really unfortunate that we have a very rigid education system that doesn't seem to allow for divergent thinking, or anybody who just can't sit still and be quiet and concentrate for long periods of time, which is so sad, because we don't want to crush the spirit of our kids, because the world needs them. And I feel so passionate about trying to preserve kids' self-esteem as much as possible through that process. And I've often asked parents in my community, if you took school out of the equation, would you have a problem? And the answer is always no. And that just really breaks my heart, because teachers are obviously doing absolutely the best that they can in the context of the system that they're working within. But yet this system just doesn't work for our children. And then as parents, we try our hardest in the ways like you with your podcast, me with my podcast, whatever, to bridge the gap for our children. But they are so unique and they're so amazing. And I think for every challenge, there is the opposite strength. And if you can learn to understand your brain and why you're having the challenges that you're having with that ADHD lens, with that neurodivergent lens, then very quickly, the flip side of that is you can also learn the skills to be able to navigate this stuff and really allow yourself to move forward and become the best person that you can possibly be. But the world needs our children. They are so amazing. ADHD, any neurodivergence is way more than the stereotype that people often misunderstand it to be, or the media headlines might suggest. Underneath it is the most fascinating, complex neurodivergence that it genuinely excites me every single day. And I guess for the future, my biggest hope is that right now the diagnosis is so important, because without it, in the limitations of our education system, our kids can't get the support that they need. My hope is that we move beyond that to a world where actually we're catering for the unique learning needs of all children, and that the diagnosis itself becomes less important. That's really my hope. In the meantime, I just want to do everything I can to really help educate people to understand ADHD, how the ADHD brain works, and what we can do to help support our children. But also, you know, this is relevant to adults, mums having late diagnoses too. So
I would like the world to know that I think for too long, neurodivergence has been talked about as like a need, something to be fixed, or, you know, the language is very deficit based, particularly in the medical model. But I can tell you as a neurodivergent person in a very neurodivergent family, working with neurodivergent people all the time, there are so many joys and positives. And I think, you know, I believe we should celebrate the diversity in experience. You know, we don't want to all be having the same experience. And just like we celebrate things like biodiversity, we should celebrate neurodiversity as well. And difference is a good thing. But I also want people to know that the most important thing, I think, is just to support people like judgment-free where they're at as they are. You know, we don't want people to feel that they are less than, or that anything needs to be changed or fixed. Like, meeting people with compassionate understanding is so key. And I think when we do that, then we give neurodivergent families a better chance of a positive start. Too many neurodivergent families kind of start their lives together on this foundation of trauma, often birth trauma, because they haven't felt supported and they haven't felt acknowledged and understood. So let's change that. Let's work to really just meet people with compassion and humanity. Like, we're all going through the very human experience of childbirth. And yeah, ultimately then we can support those neurodivergent families to have a much more positive start.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see more places like our space popping up. I would love to see more places like an ordinary cafe that maybe has a quieter corner. You know, basically, I would love loads more people who work in shops and in cafes and in offices to be more aware of how to talk to neurodivergent kids and adults. Because I'm sure everybody who goes to work in an office or a shop or wherever will either have somebody who's neurodivergent on the staff or who they will meet. And, you know, you see lots of things on telly about dealing with all sorts of stuff. I don't see quite so much about that. And I think if people like bus drivers had more training and shop assistants had, just a little bit of awareness, that would make life a whole load easier for a load of parents with their kids, and also for adults who maybe are very high functioning but still are neurodivergent and find some aspects of everyday life difficult. So yes, education, definitely.
I would say that everybody is doing the best they can. Everybody is trying their hardest. There's nobody out there that, like I just said, is trying when it comes to neurodiversity for people, in the dyslexia world. Nobody is trying to be that kid who can't read and spell. Nobody wants that. So just acknowledge that they are trying as hard as they can. They're doing their best. And, we just need a little compassion, empathy, and a lot of expertise.
If we're relating it to travel, I think we really just would feel more comfortable going to different destinations if there were resources and accommodations available to us. And I understand that has to do with us as well. We shouldn't have to be the guinea pigs. However, if we don't go to these destinations, then how are they going to know how they can accommodate us, or, what kind of resources we might need? And so I think if we're relating it to travel, I would just really love for brands and businesses and suppliers to know that families like ours really do want to travel. We just want to go to destinations that are going to be knowledgeable and accommodating for families like ours.
Or I think it's about
inclusion, I guess, and what I was just talking about. But that inclusion means changing environments and not changing people. And this works for travel, but it also works for like education and just things in general. That we need to stop trying to change children, stop trying to change neurodiverse people and change the environments that they're in, because your example of Berlin is perfect. When we change environments, life is accessible for neurodiverse people. We don't need to change people. We need to change environments, and then things work. Things are just accessible and people are included.
That's a great question. I think I almost think of like, and it's an analogy I use a lot, but the chocolate and peanut butter thing. And I apologize. My mom is British and hates peanut butter. And I know a lot of UK people don't like peanut butter. I don't understand it. However, the world thrives on different people and different personality types and different neurotypes. If we were all the same, then we wouldn't get very far. And there's studies into like neurodivergence and early, not settlers, but even like early man and all the inventing the wheel and fire and all these things that our people probably were responsible for. So yeah. I think if the world understood more about, if the world made more of an effort to actually, like if you're running a business, you should be seeking out different people with different minds, because that's going to make things better for your business. And it's the same for life, like in general, like just if all you do is speak and hang out with the same people, you can get a little dull. I wrote a book about networking. I love networking and meeting people and relationships and all this stuff. So I think the world needs to know to kind of get out of its own comfort zone and meet new people. And you never know what will come.
Something I always say, just kind of in regards to when anyone in my family or anyone I know has a different way of doing things, different isn't wrong. It's just different. So if I have a different way of doing something, it's not necessarily incorrect. And I think a lot of the world doesn't understand or take the time to appreciate the novelty of doing things a different way. Even if it takes longer, even if it's a little more complicated, it's not wrong. And it's okay to let people do things differently than society tells us it needs to be done. Because I know for me, at least, allowing myself to do things in the way that my brain wants to, especially in regards to creativity, has really opened a lot of doors for me. I feel like I spent a lot of my life masking. And then the past year of just being like, screw it. If I have a creative idea, I'm going to move forward with it. I've seen a lot of success with it that I never would have seen had I tried to continue to do things the way that everyone else does. So I guess that's what I would say. Different isn't wrong, and different can be beautiful, and different can really change the world.
Okay. 3 things. 1, it's not a superpower. It's a difference. And it's a difference that relies on our environment. In other words, in some environments, we are going to thrive and look like the winners. But in the modern environment, this is number 3, in the modern environment, it's not set up for us. Okay, I've been at this computer now since 9 a.m., right? And so that's 4 hours. For those of you who don't, you're like, great, I don't know what time it is. Yeah. But for 4 hours, my brain's not made to do that. Now, I've enjoyed talking with you. You're delightful. And I have another meeting right after this. Yeah. I'm going to hop up. I'm going to do quickly like some things to kind of get my body moving, because I'm not wired for this kind of life. I'm wired to be outside. My happiest times are when I'm working outside in the yard for 8 hours a day. Now, I'm not going to make a living doing that. I wouldn't be happy making a living doing that. But you know what? I love just that physical labor, coming in with my muscles kind of sore, soaking in a bath and my nails are kind of grimy. Love all of that, right? Because it meets my ADHD desires, right? Yeah. So I want people to understand you're not broken, but you do have caution tape on you. And so we either have to align ourselves somehow with our environment or do things to start to manage ourselves. And I really want people to love the families that they were given. I know that's not possible for everyone. I write about my experiences that aren't great in families, but I want you to love the best you can
the people you're related to?
I found it just like a lot of fun. And I know I've said this before, but as hard as it is, it's also just really good fun, and to see the gains and to see your children having fun and to see their progress and to see them growing and developing. And, you know, you may never get to this stage, but, you know, it's for your children to eventually, you know, say to you, I'm really proud of you, or, you know, you've been a really good dad, and, you know, and I love you. And whilst my children say that a lot whilst they're younger, because I think, you know, at that age, they do show a lot more affection and things like that, just to know each and every day that actually it is worth it, and to be their dad, to, you know, to lead them and to just grow with them.
What would you say to the dads who probably will never hear their kid's voice?
I think inside they can still articulate. Whether you hear it or not, you can see the joy and the expression on your children's faces. You know, just, you know, knowing that, you know, they can run up to you, or they can hug you, or, you know, they can smile, and sort of know deep down that, like, they do love you and do love their fathers and their mothers as well. And, you know,
so I know I've asked this question before, but is there anything thinking about Father's Day that you want the world to know, kind of maybe specifically around Father's Day, around neurodiverse people?
I mean, they're some of the most outgoing, sociable, friendly people I've known. I've had many friends who have learning disabilities, and, you know, they have a better social life than me. And then just to see that in my children, you know, see how they sometimes have no filter, and that filter can be used for good. And, you know, to see them in new situations, whether they're not embarrassed about things or they're just, you know, very creative. It's just really, really lovely to see that, and very inspiring.
I think it's hard, isn't it? Because I want to say something that no one said before, but everyone's kind of said everything. But I think for me, and we spoke about it a bit earlier, I want you to look deeper into those people, look at their eyes, look at their movements, and get to know the whole volume of those people. Don't just wait for words. Don't just wait for AAC buttons. Don't just wait for pecs or Makaton. You know, let's bring it back to basics and really feel in our hearts what someone's feeling. That's what I want people to do again.
I turn it on its head, and I say neurotypical as at its time, all right? I don't care for neurotypical people anymore. The message is for neurodivergent people. Hold tight, because the world is changing. The world is changing very quickly now. And, you know, people, I think, are waking up to the fact that difference is good. Difference is needed. So my message probably goes out to those that are neurodivergent and says, hold tight, because it's coming. The change is coming, and, you know, let's all bang the drum. Neurotypical has to change. There's so many things in the world that are just so screwed up because they're neurotypical, and the expectation is that you will fit to that groove, and that has to change.
All of you have utterly brilliant, unique brains, and the world is so lucky to have you. However, these unique, brilliant brains are also quite fragile, and therefore we do need to work on ourselves, and that is self-care. It's looking at diet, it's looking at nutrition, it's looking at spending time outside and really looking after ourselves. Because unfortunately, right now, that support network is not there in the real world. So we have to do it ourselves.
That everyone's journey is different. I think we live in a world where everyone compares. And I think, unfortunately, it's just, you can't, can you? You know, my two kids are the complete opposite, and they're both autistic. No two journeys are the same. And I think people need to be a bit more wary of that. I think there's always that, oh, well, your child's verbal, your child's non. Do you know what I mean? There's always someone's going to say something negatively. And I think, why can't people focus on the positives rather than the negatives? You know, living with ARFID is really, really, really hard. but he's the happiest kid. You know, he loves life. And I think everyone in general, isn't it? They always just, people pick on the negatives. People would rather comment that, oh, your child's only eating milk. I'm like, okay, well, he's most probably happier than you though, because he would never be nasty to someone. I think, yeah, everyone just has to remember that everyone's journey is completely different. And it takes a lot to raise a child with neurodivergence or even just any additional needs, any hidden disability. It takes a lot.
Oh, that they are the best, the literal best. Yeah, I think that is it. Just that every single person I know who has a different brain than I do is way more interesting, is way more fun, has a completely different perspective that always makes me think and teaches me something. And I think that is the true joy that I find in interacting with people who are neurodiverse or have a different brain than me in some way.
Oh, that is such a great question. I'm actually going to give a maybe surprising answer. What I want people to know about neurodiverse people is that neurodivergence is an umbrella term. And my answer here is really actually targeted towards ADHD and autistic people. We often use the word neurodivergent to describe ourselves, which is valid, totally valid. We often forget how many people actually fall under that umbrella. And this is a reframing I've been doing over the last little bit of when I am talking to the neurodivergent community, trying not to think about or trying to be more aware of, I'm not just talking to ADHD autistic people. I'm also talking to, folks like my brother who are bipolar and things like that. That all falls under neurodivergence. And so in my surprising answer, it's actually to the ADHD autistic folks to go, hey, there are other people under this umbrella. How do we bring them into this conversation too? So that we're not just talking ADHD autism. We're also talking about, the people who are schizophrenic, for example, they're also under the neurodivergent umbrella. And so when I use that term, I want to make sure that I'm talking to all of us, and that neurodivergence is really seen as just seeing and thinking about the world differently, not by choice, right? So that would be my answer to that, is just the consideration of everyone under that term instead of just, someone like myself who fits in a little differently.
I think the main thing for me is that just because things might be more challenging in some areas, neurodiverse people have so many strengths that, maybe neurotypical people perhaps don't have. I know that like my own daughter, she is like so creative and so focused. Like she gets hyper focused on the things she enjoys. And like I use that to kind of the advantage when we're going through sleep. Like I said, with the crafting and the drawing, like we factored that in as part of her bedtime routine. So it is playing on the child's strengths as well. And again, that main message is just because it is a little bit more challenging and it is different to maybe what you've been typically told, like I said, this perfect bedtime routine, how it should look, doesn't mean your child can't achieve it. Like we just need to think outside the box a little bit. So yeah.
If I was going to just sum it up to one thing, I think just understanding that neurodivergent people aren't broken. And I think this gets a little bit tricky because we are, like I just mentioned, we're kind of fighting the schools for getting our child help. They don't learn well in this environment, but it's because they don't learn well in this environment. And that's where I think there's a misunderstanding. Generally speaking, neurodivergent individuals will struggle in school, whether it's because of organization or it's because they're not understanding the concepts. And they'll struggle sometimes in their peer relationships and they won't follow through on things. And so there's this idea that they're not very smart or they're somewhat lazy, they're not very capable, and that they're broken. And I will say that if I post on social media that ADHD is a superpower, there will be a lot of people that come out of the woodwork and say, oh, it's ruined my life and it's not a superpower. And it's a little bit offensive to hear that. But there's just as many people that get very offended if you call ADHD a disorder, which medically speaking it is because of the executive function deficits. But the reason I would really love for people to understand ADHD better is that our ADHD brains are incredibly intelligent and powerful and creative. ADHD and autistic individuals are brilliant. And if the environment was different, just if we're ADHDers, we learn best when we can walk around and we can touch and feel things, right? We're using our body and we can be creative and we can write about whatever we want instead of the one boring thing that you're telling me to write about. If we had a different learning environment, we would soar, because as soon as the hyper focus kicks in, we're able to do things very quickly, right? And creatively. So the idea that ADHDers are broken, or there's something wrong with them, or they're not very smart, I would love for people to understand what ADHD really is. And that's not to say that there aren't things. We do know that we have a nervous system that can become overstimulated, and we have to learn to regulate our emotions. But when somebody learns to do that, when they learn to overcome the things that are holding them back and then become more aware of the things that will put them ahead, that's when they really start to find success in their life. And so to this day, I will shout from the rooftops, I am so grateful for my ADHD. It's helped me in business. It's helped me with creativity and being an entrepreneur. We always say there's like a sixth sense. We can read people really well. There's things that I just love that I have. But if you would have asked me in my 20s, even though I didn't know at the time I had ADHD, I would say, oh yeah, it's terrible. I can't follow through on things. And RSD was just, it was crippling. But we can overcome those things. And when we do, it's a complete game changer. And if the world understands that, and there's a lot less criticism and a lot more support for our brains, then I think that we would start seeing neurodivergent individuals really start to transform the way that they see themselves at a much earlier age.
Oh my goodness me. They're massively misunderstood, incredibly creative, and have so much untapped talent. I think we are losing so much progress, so much innovation, and so much benefit by the fact that we do not allow ourselves to adapt our ways of thinking to work with theirs rather than expect them to work with us all the time.
This might be obvious, but I'll try and elaborate on it, is that it is a spectrum. Everybody is different. And, even ADHD can show up. Like, I actually started with my TikTok and everything, making things slanted more towards women with ADHD. And I very quickly realized that actually these symptoms that are women with ADHD, not just women, some guys with ADHD also have ADHD in that women way. It's all different. And I think as well, sometimes I'll say to people, like, it's people closest to me, I haven't been diagnosed with autism, but I do think I'm autistic. And I will say this to people, and they're like, no, you're definitely not autistic because you're too socially capable. It's like, that it isn't necessarily true. And I've also been to therapists who have said to me, there's no way that you have ADHD before I was diagnosed, because, it would just show up differently. It's like, it's a spectrum and everybody is different. And I'm not going to behave in the same way as, somebody else is going to behave. And it's not even male and female difference. It's everybody is different. And I don't like this idea that, oh, you can't have it because you don't do this. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense, because I might not show that symptom, but there might be something else that I do show that you might not perceive as ADHD or autism or whatever it is, but actually it very much is. So I think that's kind of the main thing that I would want people to know, is that it's a spectrum. Everybody is different. And that's an amazing thing. I think neurodivergent people have a real place in this world. And I think a lot of people think it's a negative thing, as a negative light on it. And even people who are diagnosed often are like, oh, then that means I'm going to really struggle in my life. Or I don't want to tell my kid that they're autistic because they're going to really struggle. And it's like, no, because it can also be an amazing thing. And don't get me wrong, I struggled with it as a kid. I didn't know I had anything, but I struggled with my brain. And I really, I used to say to my mom as a child, I want to swap my brain for someone else's. I don't like it. I'm uncomfortable. I'm upset. I'm angry, whatever. I say I have anger issues and this and that. So it is really hard, but it's like, I would want people to know that there are so many strengths
there are so many strengths. And the way that you see the world if you're neurodivergent is really, really hard, but it's also amazing because you see things differently. And that is a strength if you can see it as one, which is hard. 100%. I get that.
I think it's to believe the parents. There's a lot of media circulation that it's a choice that it's something that they choose, but also to believe the parents, because the parents are the ones who live and breathe it every single day. And what you might get is an education setting or family members or a college setting, or that they actually are very, very good at masking. So their behavior may be absolutely fine at school. And then you've got parents on there, that are literally in despair. And they're saying to their school or, this is not what they're like. And it's that belief, and that just, it adds something else to the stress of the parents. That would be my top thing. But also and I said this earlier, it's not that they won't do something, it's that they can't do it. So just cut them a bit of slack.
We're everywhere. This is not a trend. No one spends this much time questioning themselves, researching, figuring themselves out, going and getting evaluated, or that's a luxury, first of all, but identifying or being diagnosed with autism or ADHD, there's no prize. This is not positive attention. It's very difficult. And so that is something very common right now that I really wish that we could get. We need some PR on that. But we're everywhere. There are way more of us than you think there are. And we all look and sound and behave different. If you've met one autistic ADHD person, you've met one of us. And that breaking down not only like the stigma, but that awareness really does help everyone. We all have a seat at this table. Autistic people need to be the ones that we take the lead from about autism. ADHD people need to be the ones that we take the lead with about ADHD. And that's a slow journey, but that's why we are all here now. We finally have the language. And as far as what I would really love for someone that maybe doesn't know very much about neurodivergent people is that by and large, if you really see us and allow us to really see you, we are the best people to have in your life.
I would want the world to know that you, Greer, you speak beautifully to this. And I think in the way you communicate and the work you do on the podcast, even your website, the great way it just communicates the incredible strengths that accompany any differences in terms of how I see the world and experience the world. And I love the ways that you speak to those strengths in so many different ways. That feels incredibly important to us in the work we do too. In fact, just recently, I was with an amazing elementary age boy who's been newly diagnosed with ADHD. And we were talking about what he's learning that means and the superpowers. I love to use that language, the superpowers of that. We talk about how that always means you have extra energy and extra creativity, which you speak beautifully on the website about how many of these remarkable individuals become entrepreneurs. They bring that, they figure out how to harness that creativity and energy to use it for good. And I love anchoring kids to a solid understanding of that's part of what this means. And I had a really fun little elementary age boy years ago who had been newly diagnosed with ADHD. And his explanation, kind of how he had come to a place of understanding was, he goes, my mouth just moves faster than my brain. My brain can't keep up sometimes. And it was just like this, I have all these great things I want to say and great things I want to do. And my brain just has to learn to keep up with that sometimes, that extra energy, that extra creativity. And so I think speaking to the strength of it is something that feels so important to me.
I love that. And I think I would say similarly, we are living in a world where kindness and empathy feel less than ever, feel like they're being expressed less than ever. And as you said, and both of you, that there is this superpower, there is this thinking outside of the box that is such a gift. And I remember a girl years and years ago that I counseled, and she was struggling a lot because I think she didn't feel understood by her peers. and was having a lot of anxiety, likely had some ADHD. And I saw her for several months and we talked a lot about how she didn't feel like she fit socially. And then I remember one week she came in and she had actually needle pointed a little pillow that said, "Difference is beauty."
Mm.
And I think that's what I would want to take us back to, that difference is beauty and difference doesn't mean wrong. And we're living in a world that says that, and it's just not true. And when we can get back to difference is beauty, learning from each other, learning from your son. I mean, you have embarked on this journey of spending a lifetime of learning from him and how you can love him and how he's uniquely gifted. And I think we could all stand to do that more with each other. And so thank you. Thank you for being a voice for the world that's doing that, Greer. We're so grateful and honored to get to have this conversation with you.
Okay, so I've asked like 50-ish people, I think, or I don't know how many, but the question, what do you want the world to know about neurodiverse people? But I've never answered that question. And I have thought actually quite long and hard about how I'd answer it. And part of me wants to say ditto. Just everything that's been shared, that's how I want to answer. But as I thought about it and realized I can't really just say that, that's a bit anticlimactic. And so there's two things. They kind of go hand in hand. So maybe like 1.5. But what I really want to say is that neurodivergent people make life easier. Now, in the moment, don't get me wrong. In the moment, sometimes I don't always feel that. I don't feel that for raising a neurodivergent child. I don't feel that in being a neurodivergent relationship. And I don't feel that in my own skin sometimes. But what I do know is if we think about the inventions, the phone that you're listening from, the computer, the operating systems, the car, those sorts of things were all created by neurodivergent people. But then I go a step deeper and I think about those who are in my life who are nonverbal, those who have kind of greater needs than necessarily my family. And I think about how much love they have shown me. There's a little boy who is nonverbal that I know who is the kindest little boy. And he has shown me so much about kindness this last year, about perseverance, about courage. And he's done it without saying a single word. And I think we can so often get so busy that we can forget that without words, we can think, I guess, without words, there's no communication. But in reality, that's not true. I think about, obviously, I don't know how Apple was created. I wasn't there. But I can imagine it was a bunch of scribblings, some words, some that made sense, some didn't, on a piece of paper. And I think about those who are nonverbal and how they show love in different ways. May not make sense, but it doesn't mean it's not there. The idea isn't there. And so, I want the world to know that, yes, being neurodivergent is hard. And although the world tells us we are a burden, in reality, we take that hard and turn it around into making life easier for other people. The amount of people I know who are neurodivergent and their own business owner, bosses, who have written books, who have, done coaching, who have, all these things to help other people, not to necessarily help them, but to help other people. And so many times, I think about this podcast, it's created to help other people, and yet the world tells us all the time we're a burden. I don't know. That hits hard today. That hits hard. So take a minute, take a deep breath. Think about the people who you might need to just encourage today. Take a minute to think, hey, who could I text with this phone that was created by a neurodivergent person to say, you got this? Or send an email on the computer that was created by someone who's neurodivergent to say, keep going. Or, maybe there's just a mom who you can see at the school gate and it seems weird to give a mom a high five, but maybe that's what she wants, is a high five. So as we celebrate, take a minute to celebrate with me. Unfortunately, I cannot buy everyone a Starbucks or a Costa or a takeaway or a takeout or all those things. Unfortunately, my budget does not stretch that far. But take a minute to celebrate this journey that you've been on. Celebrate this year of learning together, because I am so excited for the next year ahead. I am so excited. Some of it I have planned, some of it I have ideas and things that I want to create, and some of it I have no clue. We'll see what year 2 brings. We'll see what I'll be saying a year from now, because part of me is not really sure. But what I do know is this journey isn't over. So go and have a great week, and we will see you in here next week.